Hey ladies, got a struggle? Need to vent? It's time to join your voice and get down to business with some critical thought, where like-minded ladies share their personal experiences to empower each other, using critical thinking to make wise decisions. And now, here's your host, Lady C.
This is Lady C. I want to thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Critical Thought under the special series of The Struggles of Jehovah's Witness Women. Susan Gaskin is my guest on this episode, and she's going to be talking about her own personal struggles. She is an online advocate to help individuals to learn that you, in fact, have made a wise decision in leaving the Jehovah's Witness faith, because you are not alone in this struggle. So Susan is going to help join her voice with other women as they talk about their struggles. Thank you so much, and welcome to the show, Susan.
Hi, Lady C. Thank you so much for having me on The Critical Thought. I'm really excited to be here. I love listening to your show, and you do just amazing things. And so thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Susan. I'm so glad that you're here and to have gotten to know you and to learn so many of your experiences as you have gone through so many struggles being in this organization. Because I think that all the women that join their voices together can see that they're not alone and that they can actually get help and assistance and learn about how other women handled their own personal struggles. And so by listening to these interviews and sharing our thoughts and joining our voices, it's going to be something that we can all gravitate to help each other. So I'm just so happy that you're willing to be here to have this discussion.
I think it's great. I think your show is amazing. It really is helping women, and I think it's such a great idea because we really do need help. You know, and I think we can all come together, just like you said, and share our experiences and strengthen one another, you know, to move forward with what we've learned in life.
Absolutely. So don't you agree that when you were in the organization, that the only role that they wanted women to be part of was actually going out door to door and bringing in more recruits?
Definitely. I mean, they would say that all the time. The women are a large army. I mean, they recognize the fact that you know, the women in this Stepford wife role that they put us in. Yeah, that's what they wanted us to do. The men are working, the women are home with the aprons, and we're the ones that are supposed to go out and recruit members. Definitely.
Yeah, and it's just so wonderful that this new source of information has come to the surface so that we all can look at our lives and realize that we have other options besides just doing what the Watchtower wants us to do with our spare time. So, Susan, in getting with your story, you know, how did you and your family come to be involved with the Jehovah's Witnesses?
Well, I did manage to find a picture of me sitting under a Christmas tree at the age of 6 months of age, but that was to be my last Christmas because my parents were tricked into believing that the end was going to be coming in 1975. So they decided, you know, that this is the truth, and they thought it was so great, and they became baptized members. And so I was brought up in the organization right from the very beginning. But unfortunately, as I know you're aware, my father ended up quitting his jobs. He worked for the federal government, a nice, white-collar job, office job, and with benefits and everything, because he believed that he needed to pioneer and bring in as many people as he could. And of course, that didn't happen, right? I mean, I was just very young at the time. I remember waking up, you know, January 1st, 1975. I don't know what I really thought was going to happen, but I was told the end is going to come. So I was pretty scared that, the world's going to blow up or what. I didn't have any comprehension of what that really meant. But of course, it didn't happen. And then my dad wasn't able to get his job back once he realized that the end wasn't going to come. So we ended up having to sell our home, and we moved to the west coast of Canada because at that time, it's not like that now. The prices have gone quite the opposite way, but at that time, houses were much cheaper on the west coast, and that's why I found myself over there.
So how did you feel as a youngster growing up in this religion? Did you enjoy being part of this organization?
No. I have a memory. I don't know how old I was, maybe 4 or 5, anyways, or around the age of 5. But I remember I hated going to meetings. I mean, every meeting I was at, and I'm not joking when I say this, I was a very fidgety child, and sitting still was not easy. As it is, most kids don't have an easy time with that. But all I'm saying is every meeting I have a recollection of my mother threatening to take me to the back and spank me. I mean, she'd always say, do I have to take you to the back and spank you? And she would from time to time. But I hated that, and I remember this one memory I have of saying, I'm not going to the meeting. And my parents, I guess they thought that they could trick me into believing I could stay home. So they said, okay, you can stay home. So they let me, and I was like, yes. And they closed the door, and I have 2 older brothers, and they all left. And I guess they thought I'd start crying my eyes out when I realized they left me alone in the house. Well, I was thrilled. I was getting my dollies out. I was all excited to stay home by myself. But, of course, no parent's going to leave their 5-year-old kid at home by themselves. This was obviously a trick. And once they realized that I wasn't falling for their trick, they came back in, grabbed me, put my sweater on, and said, you're coming with us. And I remember saying, but you said I could stay at home. Yeah, so their little trick didn't work, But yes, I hated it. I absolutely hated going.
So do you think that you not liking the organization had to do with the fact that it was so relentless, or was it the teachings, or what was it about this organization that you really didn't like about it?
I had no friends at that time in the organization. I mean, we moved to the West Coast when I was 9. So it was a few years after the 1975 thing. But I had no friends in the organization, and I remember the book study was at our house, and I remember being terrified because of the books that we were studying. The pictures were so scary, and they were always focusing on the end, of course. And the book study conductor would always put me on the spot. He'd always say, Susan, what's the answer to this question? And the answer was either always Jehovah or Jesus. But there was one time when my mind was, I shouldn't say one time, my mind was always wandering because I had no idea what we were talking about. And he asked me a question, and I just said whatever I was thinking. And what I remember I said Scooby-Doo. I actually said Scooby-Doo because that's what I was thinking. I just blurted out whatever I was thinking. And everyone laughed. And I sat there like, oh my God, did I say that out loud, But I'm just a kid, like I'm 5 or 6 years old, and I guess they thought it was cute to ask me, put me on the spot all the time like that. But I was embarrassed. So I had no good memories. I had no idea what they were talking about. It was always doom and gloom, and I didn't like it. I have to say, I only started feeling a little bit like I liked it when we moved to the West Coast because there was a girl my age who was in our hall, and she was thrilled to have me too. So I actually had a friend at that point. So that made it easier.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. What led up, or what was the circumstances that led up to your baptism?
Well, again, the end is always hanging over your head. And I had that best friend in the organization, and we'd go in service all together all the time. And I actually liked being in her car group because her parents were very lax. Even though they were ex-missionaries, they were sent to Pakistan. But so when they went in service, it was very easy. We'd do a couple of calls, and then we'd do a little bit of door-to-door, and then we all go for coffee, and then we do return visits. So it was very, very much we just sit in the car and talk. And this girl, who was my friend, she said to me one day, we were the age of 14, she said she wanted to get baptized at the next assembly. And I knew as soon as that happened that the push would be on for me to have to get baptized too. And so I made a fake dedication that night to Jehovah. I remember in my nightly prayer, I just said I guess I'll get baptized too, kind of thing, because there was such a it's hard to explain, but within the organization there was so much pressure to move forward and to get baptized, and I knew that if I didn't do it, I'd be labeled a goat. So I did. I got baptized, unfortunately. I never thought beyond the organization. I trusted my parents that it was the truth. And even though I wasn't really into it, it just felt like I needed to do this, So basically you're looking at peer pressure is what brought you in. Definitely. And yet it's funny that the organization prides itself in trying to teach people not to succumb to peer pressure. And yet the peer pressure within the organization is huge. I did not want to be labeled a goat. I remember anybody who was considered anyone around the age of 16 who was not baptized yet was considered a goat. Like, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you getting baptized? Why aren't you, doing this for Jehovah, And I didn't want to be like that. I always tried to be a good person and a good kid, and I was very obedient. I didn't give my parents any troubles whatsoever, other than that sweater incident I referred to earlier at the age of 5.
Right. You know what? When you think about it, it's interesting what you're saying, because when you think about, you already are limited in who you know in the organization, and there's not that many people your age to hang out with, and then all of a sudden, yes, you're still going to meet you're underage, but at the same time, if you're not baptized by a certain age, they begin to look at you as bad association.
Exactly. And then you're put in a really bad spot, because you're not allowed to have worldly friends, and the ones that you are allowed to be friends with in the organization view you as a bad person. So you're really in a bad, position now.
And for me, I'll be honest with you, when I was growing up, when you go to school and you have the so-called worldly friends, and they're out there giving you a hard time because you don't celebrate the holidays, so you're doing everything that you're supposed to do within the organization. So that means you're an outcast with the people you go to school with, and then it's a double whammy when you go to the Kingdom Hall, and now you're an outcast there.
Exactly. And that's totally how it was. And there was a girl who also moved into our hall. When I turned 15, there was a girl who moved into our hall. She was already baptized, and she would tell people, "Oh, I'm going to quit school to pioneer." And people were holding her up as an example. "Oh, isn't that great? So-and-so," I don't want to mention her name, but, it wants to do this, as if I should be doing that. And I remember thinking, I don't think that's a good idea. I mean, even at least I had enough sense not to want to quit school after grade 10, because that legally you had to go until at least grade 10, at least in Canada. And plus I knew she was a phony too. This girl was leading a total double life. And I'm thinking, the people in the hall have no idea what they're talking about. They're trying to hold up this girl as an example to us, who I know is a total phony, to pioneer, quit school and pioneer. So there was an enormous amount of pressure within the organization, as if, you're nothing unless you're doing it for Jehovah. Otherwise, you're just a bad person and a goat.
Mm-hmm. I remember that in my congregation, that was a very big thing. Just as much as people were quitting jobs to pioneer because they thought the end was coming, the same was true of youngsters that were, like dropping out of high school. And everybody was quitting, either quitting a job or dropping out of school. Yeah.
So that was the mentality at the time, for sure.
Absolutely. Let me ask you this. Did you ever pioneer? And if so, did you enjoy it?
I did, unfortunately. I did, yes. When I was in the organization, I probably around the age of my early 20s, I started really throwing myself into it, and I'll get back to that as to why perhaps a bit later. But yes, I did pioneer, and I did enjoy it, believe it or not. I'm the kind of person who's kind of an all or nothing person. When I'm in the organization, I'm in. I'm never a phony. I'm never a hypocrite about the way I live my life. And now that I'm out, I'm out. I'm what they would call a full-bore apostate. So yes, I did pioneer, unfortunately, because I was fully indoctrinated. I will say that for most of my life, really, first of all, like I said before, I was pushed into it and forced to believe it. But once I got into it, I really felt like, okay, let's do it. I really believed the end was going to come, and I really felt like I needed to help people, and I did my best to bring people in, and people were coming in, unfortunately.
Oh, wow. You brought people into the organization?
Yep.
Do you know about how many people you brought in?
Actually, one got baptized, and there was about 3 or 4 more that were on the cusp, but that's when I got the boot. And funny enough, I got a message from one of them yesterday, and she's watching. And once I got disfellowshipped, she didn't want anything to do with the organization anymore. And
really?
It's very interesting. And she sent me a message yesterday saying she loves my videos, which I thought was funny.
Oh, that's so sweet. So you were able to bring her in, and she basically left because you got the boot, and now she's enjoying being out like you?
Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
That's a really good experience. No, I mean, because you have a lot of interesting things that happened to you, all the information I got a chance to know about you. And one of the things that we talked about was your experience when you visited Bethel.
Yeah.
You want to share that?
Sure. I think the thing that was unfortunate is that despite what happened, it still didn't really wake me up, but it did give me a dose of what the organization is really like, and it was a very sour spot for me. What happened was I was regular pioneering at the time, and one of my close friends was auxiliary pioneering, and we both decided we wanted to go see Bethel, and so we did this Bethel tour thing. I don't know if they still have that, but basically I live in Canada, so we went. You start at the Toronto Bethel, and then they take a bus and they go to the New York Bethel. And it was fun. We had a great time, and we both decided, why don't we stay a couple of days longer in Manhattan and just, go to some Broadway shows and have fun. But what we didn't realize was that in the States there was a holiday. I think it's Columbus Day. And we don't have that in Canada. So I was unaware that there was a holiday. And the problem with that holiday was that everything was booked. I mean, we could not find any place to stay in Manhattan. And we were staying in New Jersey while we were at part of this Bethel tour thing. But even that hotel was busy, and we couldn't even extend our stay in New Jersey. And so as a last resort, we go, why don't we call Bethel? And they said, oh, we've got this list of lodgings list or whatever. So we called literally, and I'm not joking, every single hotel on that lodgings list. There must have been about 30 hotels. Not one had availability. So we thought, okay, let's call Bethel back and say, look, we've called every hotel. There's nothing available. We're two girls from Canada, so we're kind of, I don't know, we had this idea that New York was this big violent city, which I suppose it is to some extent, but it's nothing like it used to be in the 80s. I remember the things that they would talk about going on. Anyways, long story short, I called Bethel, and I just told them our predicament, and the guy was completely unsympathetic. He just said, well, we don't have any place for you to stay. But I knew they did, and I said, well, we're both pioneers. He goes, oh. What form of pioneer ministry are you in? And I said, well, I'm a regular pioneer, and my friend is an auxiliary. And he goes, oh, well, if you were missionaries or special pioneers, we could find a place for you, but sorry, we can't help you. Click. Oh, or yeah, something like all the best to you. Click. I remember we were using a payphone outside the Empire State Building when we called them, and I just hung up like with tears in my eyes. I just could not believe. I just felt like. Because as a witness, you give up so much in life. You give up everything. And now I was pioneering and having a really hard time with it, with my health and with the man I was married to at the time. Things were really difficult for me. And I felt like, man, I've given up everything, and you can't even find me a room. And I told them I was willing to pay. I said, I'm not looking for a free handout. I just need a place to stay. What bothers me is that, I should have just called up like the YMCA or some, there's all kinds of places that you could have called that church's sponsor, for you to stay at. So I kind of felt like, boy, Satan's world would have taken me, no questions asked, but my own organization, who has a place for me to stay, we're just not the right kind of pioneers. I'm sorry, I'm only giving 90 hours a month. I'm not giving 120,
right.
And that just really bothered me. When we got back to our respective congregations, the elders asked me if I could relate my experiences of Bethel. Well, I wanted so badly to say about this, but I didn't. And I kick myself to this day. I wish I had, because I saw it as a negative experience. Obviously, it was a huge negative experience for me, and I didn't want to let the congregation know about it. But I think, I wish I had. They need to. This is the kind of thing they need to know. Not all the, the roses and unicorns and rainbows. They need to know the truth that there's thorns behind those roses.
That is absolutely true, because a lot of times I remember in our congregation, and not just in our congregation, but it was like the culture of the organization that whenever someone started talking negatively, and that would be mainly dealing with the Watchtower organization, that we were to change the subject. And so no one ever wanted to talk bad and say what things really were, because, that would really start to, put cracks in everybody's foundation, because everybody was having some negative experiences somewhere.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I actually had a sister pull me aside once and tell me, she goes, "Oh, I love the way you always turn the conversation around to something positive." I mean, the thing is, it is more my nature to be that way. It has nothing to do with the organization. But unfortunately, that was part of my indoctrination, I guess, is that when people in our car groups, like in service, would start talking negatively, I'd always kind of find a way to turn it around. You know, but it's unfortunate because you're phonies then, and you're not being real. I mean, life is what it is. There's nothing wrong with one day saying, I'm having a bad day, and this is what happened to me. There's nothing wrong with. In fact, sometimes those are the kind of things that bring you closer to someone, when you understand that they're having a hard time and they're being honest and real, not being all phony, preaching, like I said, rainbows and unicorns all the time.
No, you're absolutely right. You make a good point, because whenever we do go to the Kingdom Hall or to the assemblies and stuff, they would always march people out there so that you could hear their great experience and how wonderful it was for them pioneering. And then at that point, it would make you sitting in the audience want to do the same thing. And a lot of times the people were just saying the positive experience, and they weren't telling you the whole story. So when you started pioneering, you realize, oh my God, this is really not what it's chalked up to be.
Right. But they don't care. They don't care because, I mean, the one thing that bothered me about pioneering is I did have a really rough time, but I stuck with it and stuff. And I'd constantly be told by people, Jehovah's blessing you, Jehovah's or going to bless you. And I'd always be on convention programs because they saw, I had health problems. People knew about that. They knew I had a crappy marriage and a crappy husband, and they knew how difficult it was for me to do what I was doing. And yet I was a good example, right? Because here's Susan, pioneering, happy as can be, because I was always putting on that face, that I was happy. And I tried to be genuinely happy. I wasn't a phony. I genuinely tried to find, the silver lining to the dark cloud I was under. But it always bothered me. I remember thinking, I'm being blessed by Jehovah. How? Like, my health is getting worse and worse. My marriage is getting worse and worse. What's this blessing you're talking about? And they said, and then they say, well, it's all the parts in the meetings you get. And I thought, oh, okay.
What was it like in your congregation prior to getting married, like in terms of available brothers?
Well, there was this where I lived at the time, there was a huge push to get married. And basically it was like, find a guy, because the mentality was that the end is going to come. And, you don't want to be an old maid or whatever, because once you're like 23, that was considered an old maid. And there wasn't enough guys to go around, first of all. And they weren't great guys to begin with, So the guys always had this idea that, there's like 5 girls for every guy. So they felt like they had to pick up a crop or whatever. And the mentality, at least, I can't really speak for others, but the mentality I had was that even if you married a crappy guy, the end's going to come. So if he's really that bad, Jehovah will kill him, or he'll be perfect, right? Like if the end's going to come and we're going to be in the paradise, he's either going to be killed by Jehovah because he's such a crappy, horrible person, or he'll be made perfect. So you really had nothing to lose. Mm-hmm. That's how I felt, at least. And it's such a weird, when I say that, I realize how retarded that sounds. But that's exactly how I felt at the time.
And so then as time passed, you met your husband, you guys got married. What was your life like afterwards?
Well, he wanted to have kids, as I did. These are things you talk about before you get married. And, of course, as soon as we got married, no, he didn't want to have kids. That really bothered me. I thought, why would you have said you wanted to have kids and then you don't? And he's like, oh, we don't want to bring them up in this world. But he just was a person with a very, very low self-esteem. And I really thought because I was always a positive person, I really thought I could change that about him. But unfortunately, the one thing I didn't really look at with him was his family. He had a really, really bad family. When I say bad, when you think about Jehovah's Witnesses kids that are bad, well, his family was bad. He was like the white sheep of that family. And he's not good either. But from that family... God. Yeah, he had a brother who killed somebody. Through a drunk driving accident. But it was just a matter of time. When you're drinking all the time and driving behind the wheel, it's no accident. It's just a matter of time before you kill somebody. And he took out a guy's eye with a firework because he's so reckless. He was just a really sick individual. And his father, married the mother at that 1958 convention where you just put up your hand and say, yes, I'll get baptized kind of thing. And then he stopped going to meetings the second they got married. So my husband was kind of like that too. We got married. He wanted a good Jehovah's Witness wife. And that's what I was, right? I didn't swear. He hated girls who swore. He liked girls that, I looked after myself. I was tall and thin, and he liked that. And that's all that was really important to him. And then beyond that, he didn't care about the organization really. So we got married, and he pretty much stopped going. And the sad thing is that's what propelled me to do more for the organization. His attitude that I'm not going to do anything propelled me into pioneering, because you know that scripture about how wives can save their husbands through their good conduct and stuff. And so I took it upon myself to think, okay, well, I better save him then. I better buck up, and do my best to try to save him. But the less he did, the more I did. And that, of course, created an even greater strain on our marriage, because now you've got this wife that's totally into this cult, and you've got this husband that's, making it difficult for her to do anything. But I just view that as Satan. It's funny how you don't use common sense. I didn't use any common sense. I just felt like I've got this, Satan is gotten into him, and creating problems for me and working against Jehovah, and it just propelled me to do more. It's sheer insanity to not just take a break and just realize, you know what, this isn't right. What's happening is not right, But of course, I didn't use common sense. I used what the organization used to try to, propel you to continue doing more.
No, you're right. And you know what? I've talked to so many women as I'm interviewing them for this segment that I'm doing for these interviews. And everyone that I've talked to so far, whenever they've had a problem in their marriage, they've all indicated that the elders were trying to say that they were doing something wrong. And they never tried to make the husband do anything or make it so that you can work together as a team. But it was always the woman who was erring. And then that Proverbs, I think 31, of the perfect wife, that stuff comes up. And this one sister said that they asked her, was she cooking for her husband? And so I was like, oh, what is that? What does me cooking or not cooking have to do with him treating me right?
If you've been in the struggle and want to appear as a guest on our show, email us at exjwct@gmail.com.
Stay tuned to part 2. Susan Gaskin will continue her story, talking about her struggles as one of Jehovah's Witnesses and her relationship with her husband.
The views and opinions of our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Critical Thinkers.
This program was sponsored by Critical Thinkers.